Hi guys, I'm Dave and I'm autistic. Today I'm going to talk about self-regulation. A couple of methods that autistic people use to manage themselves, manage their stress, manage how they interact with the world and what's going on. And that's really things like stimming and special interests. So stimming is basically providing yourself with some kind of sensory stimulation. So that can be anything from some of the kind of scary ones that most people know are things like rocking. You may people rock or spin. People may chew on things, may flap their hands. All of those kind of give your body and you give your brain some kind of sensory input. It presses a button in your brain. There may be some cluster of neurons in your brain, and pressing that cluster of neurons, getting them fired up, feels good, feels comfortable, feels safe. And so that might be fiddling with fidget spinners. I've often got fidget spinners and things to hand that I will fiddle with when I'm on meetings or chatting on Zoom calls or talking to people. That can also be things like weighted blankets. Weighted blankets can be a really kind of nice sensory pressure heavy feeling. I really like my weighted blanket. It feels very grounding and very safe to me. And because my sensory sense of touch is very strong, things like stroking cats, stroking very furry things can be really quite calming and soothing. Each person who's autistic will probably have different stims and different things they like doing. Some people really like chewing things or eating things. Some people like pulling their hair. There's a whole bunch of different things, but everything basically boils down to providing your body with some kind of strong sensory input that you seek out. And the point of doing that is that it allows you to cope with sensory environments where there is less that you like. If I am in a particularly noisy and busy environment, then I will often fiddle with a fidget toy or a spinner or something in my pocket. And that smooth sensory input helps me block out some of the noise and bustle and things going on. And so we can use stimming as a way to kind of moderate that sensory input. If we've got something unpleasant, we can replace that with something more pleasant when we're dealing with it. The other thing that we've got, which kind of feels good and feels calming and more positive, is things like special interests. So special interests is where your brain has a lump of connected neurons, and that's maybe in dealing with a subject or a topic or a skill. And for young people, that can often result in kind of very classic behaviors like, oh, you might learn all the dinosaurs, or you might learn all the Pokemon, and you might be able to remember all, 300 or 400 Pokemon with all of their special skills and abilities. And that can be a calming thing for your brain to go back to. It can go through, it can kind of organize them, it can run through the lists of them, it can kind of come through, and that kind of familiar, safe behavior can kind of come through. It may be some kind of skill that you end up doing. So you may like really, really quietly drawing very, very small things or in lots of detail. Or it might be applied to things like more traditional interests. In girls particularly, they tend to have more special interests based around what is more traditional. So they may be really involved in dolls. For example, looking at reborn dolls, which are very, very hyper-realistic ones. And they may treat them as real people for a significant amount of time. It can be focused on one particular character. So some people really, really get involved with one particular character or group of characters or film or book or story and that is their special interest. So in childhood, it tends to be fairly obvious, and it tends to be kind of like maybe 1, 2, 3 things that somebody is really, really into. Quite often this will be a topic of conversation, and they will be very, very happy to talk about this at some length to anybody who will listen. For me, I've had various special interests at various times. I tend to have about one big special interest at a time. It can last for months or years. Generally, it lasts for at least a couple of years. I have gone through things like electronics. I've gone through metalworking. I've gone through making things out of leather. And for a couple of years, it was all my brain would think about. I would look at things, leather things, work out how they were made. I would look at tutorials on how to make things. I'd buy leather and make myself belts and wallets and those kind of things. And I would stitch everything and learn all the different stitches. And that was all my brain would think about. Apart from when I had to push it on to work or doing anything else, it would sit there and think about leather, and it would do that for hours a day. I would go to bed and I would watch YouTube videos on leather working or metal working, depending on where my special interest was. But it changes. So one day my brain just switched and went, okay, that's enough leather, do something else. And I kind of floundered around for a month or so, and Star Wars started coming out, and I got obsessed with Star Wars Episode 9 rumours. So the rumour mill went into overdrive before the release of Star Wars Episode 9. My brain went and read everything that was to find, every leaked photo, every set photo, everybody discussing it. That was all my brain would look at. And that special interest was really strong for about 6 or 9 months or so. And then it switched off and went to something else. So you don't always get a choice of what there's going to switch onto. It's not really possible. I haven't found a way of working out what it's going to switch to. But all I know is I've had certain ones and certain very, very strong special interests. They've been incredibly intense for 2-3 years sometimes. And then they will quite often pass and my brain will move on. I've still got all the skills. I've still got all of the memories, and I know exactly what all of the things are. But they will just, all the tools will sit in a box. All the bit kit will sit to one side. It'll go dusty, and then like 3 or 4 years later, I will just find a box of unused stuff. So it does switch. So try not to spend too much money, not more than you can afford on anything, because it can switch without warning. It can switch quite suddenly. But mine certainly go from thing to thing to thing. I've probably had about 12 or 14 over my lifetime. My current one is VR games. I really love that. I really love dancing really badly to a whole bunch of the VR games. But that's my current interest. One of my interests has also been autism, which is kind of why I do these talks and talk about things, and I know quite a bit. Often special interests focus on the detail. So when your brain aligns and everything works together, you can kind of absorb huge amounts of detail about very specific tiny things. This is great. My special interest for computers and computer science has been fairly constant through most of my life. It means that I am really, really effective as a computer programmer, computer system designer, and I've been very successful. And it's turned into a really good career. It's sometimes aligned and the stars align and it's a really good thing, but Sometimes if it's something less useful, train timetables are a classic one. That's sometimes a lot less applicable to an effective living or a way of working. It doesn't stop your brain being obsessed with it, it's not that useful. On the good side, YouTube now means that you can become an expert and a specialist in very, very niche areas. So there are a whole bunch of new careers popping up for people who have an extreme interest in a very, very specialized topic of area. They can become YouTube stars and make videos about that particular nuance of exactly their special interest, and that can work really well. I wouldn't be surprised if several of the single subject YouTubers have strong neurodiverse tendencies, let's say. Lots of children, and lots of autistic children in particular, use a lot of screen time. And this is nothing to be scared of. So for an autistic child, I grew up in the 1970s. I eventually got a computer in the early 80s when they started becoming more available, but I would always read. I would have a book, I would always have a book open, and I would always be reading. I would read multiple books a day. I would be reading 2-3 books at the same time. I'd read some from one and read another one. I would spend most of my time when I was growing up with my nose in a book. I guarantee you that if I was around today, if I was born today, I would have my nose in a tablet, because a tablet is a gateway to a vast amount of information that contains videos, YouTube training, diagrams, documentation, websites. There's huge amounts of information out there, and particularly if you've got a special interest, you can research that over and over, and there's a vast amount of information that you can learn on your special interest. So a lot of autistic children will use that as a way to self-regulate. They will use their screen time to research their special interest, or to replay the same video or familiar, comfortable topics that they've worked through and they're really comfortable with and they've seen before. They will use that as a way of self-regulating. So if they're feeling uncomfortable, or if they're feeling stressed out because there is a sensory issue in their environment, they will focus on the tablet like I used to focus on a book. And I would read the book and I would hyper focus on the book, and all my attention would go into the book, and it was able to then block out some of the uncomfortable negative stuff on the outside. So screen time for children, particularly autistic children, is not a worry for me. I would recommend allowing them the time to use those tablets for self-regulation. In the same way, gaming is a very, very strong attraction, and is often a lot of teenagers use a lot of gaming to manage their environment, to manage their brain, and to manage their stress levels. This is actively a way of your brain being able to remove or move the focus away from uncomfortable stimulus in the environment to focus on safe, predictable stuff that you can deal with. And if you can imagine a gaming environment, it's actually really attractive for an autistic person. You have a very safe environment. You can't get hurt. You can follow. You know the rules. You know exactly what's going to happen. You know, if you do here, go here, shoot this, then this will happen. It's often very, very predictable. So although even in Minecraft there are kind of things where you don't know what's going to happen exactly, you can get the general shape of what's going to happen. You know, if you go into the caves, then there might be creepers. And a lot of gaming and a lot of social bonds for teenagers is now working and playing together with gaming. There is a lot of social bonds, there is a lot of team working that goes on. Most times you'll find that the teenagers will be on team chats or calls with each other, and they will be feeding other information to work together as a team. And they will be using it as a way to manage and start to regulate their own emotions. So dealing with the difficulties in a game, dealing with the frustrations, dealing with the losses, it starts training your brain that, okay, yes, I can deal with this, I can handle this. And then when you face things in real life, you can fall back on those skills of, here's how I handled it in the game when I got killed 50 times. I stuck at it, I tried again, and eventually I got through. It can start teaching those kind of skills, those social skills that really help people. Generally speaking, autistic people and autistic households in particular, we end up with some very clear inside and outside behavior. So this is effectively, you're training your children to mask outside, to pretend to be more normal so that it's easier to get along with other people. This is either obvious things like some stimming, so some ways of hand flapping, for example, is really very obviously autistic. A lot of children learn that that's not acceptable in public spaces, so they will only start to do it at home. Some recognition of the fact that you are doing this is a good idea, and in fact you can actively manage this as inside and outside behaviors. Inside, yes, you can do this, and you can take your clothes off because they're scratchy and uncomfortable. That's fine, but when we have visitors round or when we have people go out, then you have to wear clothes because of autistic problems. So you can use that to manage inside and outside behavior. You do need to mask. You do need to teach some masking skills in order for people to actively and helpfully make their life easier in the real world. Ideally, everybody would be completely accepting of autism and everything would be really smooth, but this is the real world. There are going to be people who are not going to understand. So until we reach that point, then some masking and some understanding of masking is going to help, but it needs to be actively thought about, because realizing that you are masking and realizing you're putting extra energy into tamping down those behaviors and stopping those behaviors or doing the right thing is active energy that you haven't got for other things. If you're an autistic household, you may need to very carefully optimize your trips out. That because going out is one of the biggest things. It's a massive, very noisy, very busy environment. There's hundreds of people going through. There's lots of opportunities for new and surprising things that happen. You may bump into people from neighbours and start, get talking to them. Things may be going on. You may bump the car and you end up in an argument with someone. There's whole heaps of things that can go on in the outside world, as opposed to in the nice, calm, orderly exterior where I can control my environment. So optimizing and carefully planning trips out. You may want to use things like delivery services. If you get your groceries delivered, that can remove one of the very common, very long, tiring trips that a lot of people face. You may need to just organize yourself better so that if you've got a shopping list, grab a plan of the store or work out where the things are and organize the shopping list in order of the stuff that you need, and that will allow you to go in, get the job done and out as easy as possible. That can reduce the time you're spending in the environment, and that can reduce the amount of energy that your brain has spent or your child has spent trying to block out all of that other stuff. And then either go in the morning, which is when you're most likely to have most energy after the night, or go in a time where you can out of hours. So I know that Tesco's and some of the shopping places have autism friendly hours where they will turn the lights down, they will turn the tannoys and environment, then the announcements off for an hour. So sometimes that's a really good place to go, and if you're going to go shopping and if you need to go shopping in person. Or you might want to kind of go, if there's a 24-hour supermarket, you can go at a time when it's very, very quiet. Maybe very first thing in the morning or late at night when there's going to be a lot fewer people out. That can help manage that busyness and manage that environment. And if you're autistic, you may not realise how much of an impact that has on you. It's quite hard to sometimes manage your own energy levels and understand exactly where you're spending your energy. And that's enough for today. As always, be kind, be empathetic. You can't always see what's going on in people's heads. Be kind to yourself. If you like the video, like, subscribe. If you think I'm wrong, please let me know. If you think I'm right and this matches what you feel, let me know in the comments. Thanks everybody, and bye for now.